My name is David, and this is The Big Shut-In. So, it is Saturday, April 18th, and I just had to pull up a calendar and count, but it is the 35th day that I have been shut in here with my family. That's a long time. Anyway, it was a weird day today. They're all weird days. But it was a funny one. Last night I was just dark. I was feeling like anxious, and just the news of the world was really weighing heavily on me, and I was feeling kind of sick to my stomach over it. And just kind of not able to handle much. I canceled an interview that I was supposed to do for this just because I couldn't. I didn't have it in me. I didn't have it in me to talk to somebody, try and draw them out. I didn't want to be out myself. I didn't want to draw myself out. And it was funny. Then today, I got up and it was Saturday, and I often have to work on the weekends. I mean, I'm doing these, but I often have to do client work also. But I've been giving myself Saturdays off, and just, and I pottered around and played with the kids, cooked. I did some baking. And in the middle of that, a client called and wanted to talk about a project that he's trying to launch, and that we're trying to launch together. He's trying to get funding for, and he was in a really dark place today, and somehow there was a weird kind of mental judo thing where his dark brought out my light, and I was talking about optimism, and it's going to be great. Like, what? Of course, this is going to be this project is going to be amazing, and we're going to put the resources together, and it's really going to be useful to people, and it's going to be exactly what they need, and it's going to, and the funders are going to love it. And I was just bringing all this sunshine, and I could tell it was really inspiring him, and it was really just what he needed to hear. And I just don't know where it's just funny. It's something I do, I guess. And I realized that about myself in the moment, that I tend to want to be a balancer, energetically. If people are dark, I try and bring them up. And if people are like, hey, everything's great, I'm like, everything's not great. Like, I don't know. I don't know why I want everyone to be tepid and unenthusiastic, but apparently that's my nature. Hooray. Anyway, look, the point is that that's the roller coaster right now of this, like, feeling blue, but also having the wherewithal to pull other people out of their blue. And I don't know, it's like, I've heard a couple of times about this show that, man, I tried to listen to a couple episodes, and it's so depressing. I'm like, yeah, maybe it is, but I like listening to sad songs. I like listening to the blues. More skies of gray than any Russian play could guarantee. I like, there's something about hearing what other people are going through, and hearing that they're managing it, and hearing that they're dealing with it, and how they're dealing with it, and that you're not alone, that everybody is having these ridiculous roller coaster days of highs and lows and weirdness, and just reconfiguring everything every day. That, I don't know, I find them really helpful to do, and I hope you're enjoying listening to them also. Anyway, tonight I talked to Dan London, who I had put off yesterday, but we jumped on today. And Daniel is a historian who's been spending about the last 5 years working on his PhD in American history at NYU. He's somebody that I've collaborated with many times in the past. We did a little series on this very podcast network about New York City history. And he's a very smart guy, a very intellectual guy, a very broad thinker. and a very enthusiastic guy. The things he cares about with kind of firecracker passion, where he'll get going and it goes and goes and goes and goes and goes and goes, and just the passion just pours out of him. And that's why I've always liked talking to him, and he's not in a good place today either, and I found some things to say, and I was happy to hear his story and where he's at and what he's thinking about, and happy to try and help a little. Anyway, here's Dan. All right, you still there?
Yep.
You are live. live to tape. So how you doing, man? What's going on?
I'm doing okay. I mean, I feel like things have gone in a sort of upward trajectory of both getting used to this and also it getting weirder. Like there's not a sense of growing resolution, but also not necessarily a downward sense either. It's, I think it's generally I'm doing fine, but how I'm adapting is not going along with how the rest of the world is going. So increasing comfort at home, increasing weirdness outside. So
how do you feel about that? Do you feel okay about that?
It's been a little troubling in a lot of ways.
So what's your situation right now? Where are you staying? Who's there? How's it going? Like, what's up?
Yeah, well, I'm here in Brooklyn, off in Bed-Stuy, close to the Kingston Troop Stop, and we've really, Steph, my partner, has been prepping for this moment for a while. Not this specific moment, but this general sense that apocalypse is nigh, that things are going to get really bad. And she's been feeling this way since November of 2016, but especially since last year. So, in terms of the rhythms of how we're doing here, the sense of having a structure for getting food, for not going crazy at home by having enough things to do to keep us occupied with games and, all the content Netflix can provide, we're feeling not that stir crazy. It seems like there's a structure here. I think what's most unnerving for me at home has just been, my dissertation is about to be gone over by my committee, so I'm not sure how that's going to go. May 4th is when the decision day will happen. And also just the total collapse of the job market for, what was going to be my line, which would be higher education. And, NYU is suffering, but all over the country, it's really terrible in a situation that already wasn't great. So inside the house, things longer range are a little up in the air, but in terms of me and my partner and my cat, we're doing okay. We're finding new things to do, to learn. I'd say that where the real psychic damage is, I can see outside from my window a homeless shelter. And there was a time, not so much this past week, but there was a time when there were sirens there every single day. And the sirens were just converging on this one particular place. And it was just revealing on the one hand, just the enormous inequality of who is suffering from this. And on the other hand, so on the one hand, there's the sense of connection with what's going on. The visceral proximity of how the underserved in this community are paying the costs. On the other hand, though, there is this isolation. There's an insulation from the rest of the city. And I didn't think that was such a big deal, ironically, because when I was working in Wilmington, I was apart from the city, but I had this project that was really my entire focus that time. And now I'm a little more aware of how important it is for me to have a sort of spatial rhythm of getting out of my house, of being around different communities, whether it's just a library or an archive or a park or whatnot. And I'm sort of disconnected from that now. And having to sort of be my own center of gravity and bring in the values and people who I was able to encounter in the outside world, and having to summon that inspiration internally, it's a little difficult. So I'm feeling a little cut off from sources of inspiration and motivation a little bit. I was in a little bit of a productivity groove, not, doing perfect pull-ups or anything, but, I felt a little momentum to fix up my resume, to learn online courses, do grant writing. But now I'm actually getting back to some deeper kinds of inquiries. I'm actually getting religion a little bit more. I'm learning more about Judaism. I'm getting into some kind of philosophical reading I haven't read before, just because I find there's a need to ground myself now in a way that before I was able to get it from these places that I drew inspiration from. And I'm a little more at sea at the moment.
You never struck me as a particularly, you're obviously a very culturally Jewish and proudly culturally Jewish person, and keyed into that as a ethnic heritage, but you've never struck me as a particularly religious Jew.
Yeah.
Tell me.
I'm still not entirely sure if I would define it as religious, but becoming more. It's one thing to be culturally Jewish in the sense of expressing mores or values that read as Jewish purely because of your coming out of that tradition. But it doesn't mean you're internally referencing that tradition. You're not attuned to that tradition in your day-to-day. It's just that you act it unselfconsciously. And I think what I'm doing a little more now is consciously reading about Jewish history, Jewish values, different movements like Reconstructionism, and I'm just becoming more aware of how Jews have tried to make sense of the difficulties in their lives by drawing on their own traditions. And, there's, of course, with Passover every year, that's sort of the agenda. The agenda is you pass over this story to a new generation, which needs to make sense of the present through the light of the past, and at the same time interpret the past through the light of what's going on today. So this is an old approach. We always go back and forth, I think. But I'm just finding a need to reconstruct this wealth of resources that I haven't felt the need to go back to. And again, I think it's because I'm a little more isolated now than I used to. And
draw that line for me, though. Why does being isolated make you turn? And I'm not sure if you're turning towards the ancestors or you're turning towards God, but where exactly are you turning, and why does the current situation make that be what you want, where you want to go?
Yeah. Well, I remember I was reading a story, I think it was by Philip Roth, and he was saying how, the Holocaust could have been avoided if all of the Jews had somehow found a way to convert, or there had been some sort of decision that, we give up our heritage. And there was something inside me that said, no, that there had to be some value in retaining whatever accidental heritage, I've inherited. And everything else has fallen away. Not everything else, but quite a lot has fallen away for me in terms of the verities. To be honest, Bernie Sanders lost. that was disappointing. I've been away from DSA. That was a source of political guidance for me. Even academia, that's sort of in question right now, depending on where things go in the future. And, all these things come and go, but it is this kind of ambivalent knowledge that I'm going to be Jewish, no matter what going through. And that's a place to start from. And, how I interpret what that means, even the extent to which I prioritize it or deprioritize it or not, that's going to be closer to me than some of these other things, it seems. So, I'm not that deep into it by any means. At this point, I'm mostly just getting a lay of the land. I'm learning more about the movements, the individuals, Heschel, Mordecai Kaplan. But I'm getting a sense. I'm sort of creating an entryway, a door into developing a new reference point for establishing my values. I think what COVID is doing right now is it's forcing me to go a little bit deeper into my identity more than a lot of other things have. I think in the past, politics or even culture has been my recourse, and I can't go back to those as easily now, it seems.
Tell me more about what you're seeing in your own future in terms of, you've been working really hard for a long time towards an academic career, towards your PhD, which sounds like you're on the verge of achieving. Could be weeks away, right? Congratulations, by the way. That's exciting. To hand in your dissertation is a huge accomplishment. That's amazing. But
thank you. Yeah.
Tell me more about that anxiety, about not feeling as confident that you're going to be able to pursue that path that you've been on. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. Well, I think for a lot of graduate students, they're aware that the market has been bad for quite a while. And, you pursue your interests through higher education because the thing is intrinsically interesting to you and because you feel like it'll make a difference. But within higher education, within the graduate training, there's a kind of narrowing that takes place also. And you get the sense that if you do anything other than get a tenure track position in an Ivy League school, let's say, you're falling short a little bit. And as those sort of jobs, which were always difficult to get, those are becoming foreclosed, but also the jobs that, even jobs where you would hope to at least be able to teach in a college, I think the anxiety is that there was this dream of all of my interests coming together around teaching, around writing, around service, around research. And where those came together was to be a professor. And I know that I can take each of those sort of skills or interests and pursue them in other fields, right? But it seems like I'm going to have to cobble together another kind of life to bring these things together, either by doing many jobs in sequence or doing several jobs sort of at once, being sort of entrepreneurial about it, or maybe even, it's exciting trying to, make my own path. But there's this very powerful sense of unity of purpose around being a professor, about the professorship as a vocation. And to see that seem less likely, it requires rethinking of what you want from a job. And in some ways, it's, you never want to put all your eggs in one basket. It's important to disabuse yourself of romanticizing that life regardless. But, there's a sense of diminishment that comes from seeing that option for me become less likely.
I mean, I'm not an academic, and so I guess it hadn't occurred to me, really, the fear you're talking about. That, I mean, do you not think, I mean, we're going to get out of this, we're going to get out of quarantine eventually, we have to, and you don't think people are going to then, who wanted to go to college, are going to go to college? You think it's because of people's economic situation will be different? I mean, do you think it's because the infrastructure won't hold? Like, what is it exactly? What is your fear exactly?
Well, I mean, I think what's going to happen out of this is just an acceleration of what's already been happening. I don't think it's like, I am hearing reports of colleges closing, of private colleges having to choose amalgamation to survive, and public colleges just closing branches. That's the most dramatic stuff recently. But I think the trends that are happening now are just, there's going to be more remote learning, and so a growth potentially of adjunctization, which leads to not great work conditions, not great pay, not great chance of advancement, any of those things. I think that people in my position are going to find other ways of teaching, other ways of doing research, and they're going to find ways of making the most out of that situation. There already are things like that. The Brooklyn Institute of Social Research is one, a bunch of grad students getting together or recent PhDs teaching each other, teaching folks who want to shell out the money, not attached to a university. But I think that, this could last quite a while. And people are talking about 2021 potentially keeping some colleges closed. And, to a certain extent, what I'm doing now is something that I've always tried to tell myself I do well, which is worrying and trying to anticipate the worst and steeling myself for, disillusionment later, in this case around getting hired.
I mean, you mentioned before a uniquely Jewish perspective on dealing with catastrophe. But truly, if there is one, anxiety and pessimism must be cornerstone bricks of that edifice.
Yeah,
right?
it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I was reading the other day about Judaism and neuroticism, and apparently there isn't a one-to-one, even when doing all the kinds of scientific regression for this kind of thing. But no, I do think that when I'm reading, I was reading this great book that just got reissued by Cynthia Osnick, called The Romance of American Communism. And it's about all these working class, not just Jews, but many working class Jews joining the Communist Party in the 30s through the 1950s. And, what was giving them a sense of hope while all this terrible thing was happening around them. was a sense that history was on their side. And it's and history was on their side precisely because things were so terrible, but that out of this terrible situation, people were going to be forced to uncover the roots of what was driving this machine and get a better sense of how to take it on. And I was reading about the Jews and how there's the sense we're the chosen people. What a joke. Every generation we're singled out, certainly, by humans to try to, wipe out or whatnot. But every generation of Jews, according to this one commentator, has felt that they were going to be the last. And it's going on and on and on. And the pessimism, the sense that it's just one thing after another, the fact that you can be alive and you can call on 2,000 years, if you can call on 2,000 years of defeat and still be around to talk about that, then you're not doing that bad,
That's right. Yeah. Judaism calling on 2,000 years of defeat. That's fabulous.
So yeah, I think there's a pessimism there, but it's married to a sense of stubborn. We're going to bear it out, and maybe that means, and also I have to say one thing that I think gives me a little more courage as a Jew is the sense that we can leave this country. Like, I am not as nationalist. I've never been a nationalist, but I'm starting to sort of chip away a little bit the connection between Jewish and American. Maybe that sounds a little traitorous, but this sense that it's been in my folks' heritage to leave the Ukraine, to leave Poland, to leave these countries when it wasn't fitting us. And that's not available to everybody, and I don't want that to be this kind of privileged flight, in the same way that folks from the Upper West Side are just hightailing it out. That can be irresponsible, but I don't know, there's something that's a little bit freeing about this is a live option should things go a certain way.
And are you talking about going to Israel or something? Like what exactly do you mean by that?
I don't know. I mean, it could be wherever, Latin America, Canada. I have some relatives who live in Brazil, though that isn't looking so hot now. So yeah, I don't know.
What you're saying is not that you have a particular ability to leave. It's that you have an identity you could hold on to.
But it's an identity that gives me permission to leave. Like it's not like an English person or a French person can go to Russia or China and feel that they're being fully French, I think, in the same way.
Right.
I don't know. There's a connection between geography and peoplehood in other places that the Jews, I mean, it's tricky because we feel very connected to our communities, maybe, or to New York City in my case, but it seems a little more flexible. And I mean, the combination of COVID and the job market being what it is, it's just making me a little more resigned to be open to what might happen. Not accepting, but just open to what I might do in response. That's what I mean. Does
the lack of, and here's an understatement, but the lack of A+ leadership from Washington in all of this situation, and feeling, you mentioned before, your sort of political disappointments lately, that that your your horse fell at the last hurdle,
mm-hmm.
and the Democratic Party is taking a much more centrist turn than a lot of people hoped it would, and you know, I mean, does all of that conspire in what you're saying to make you feel less connected to the United States in a way?
Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, I was the fact that the president is screwing up now is not it's that's not exacerbating anything. I'm not going to get outrage burnout from seeing what Trump is doing. I mean, it's disgusting. For example, the bailout and how many people are going to get rich off this tragedy. Um, I think what
I want to clarify that nobody's going to get rich off this tragedy.
well,
People who are already rich are going to get richer.
fine, you're right. That's a better way of putting it. You're right. Yeah. I think that there's a sense of hostility from the Democratic establishment, which is nominally supposed to be the opposition to Republican. The sense of hostility that the ideas I hold, the values that I want to see more of in politics, that I would be opposed. That it is this sense of there's a narrowness that I feel for what the space of acceptable discourse is in this country. And that's at least on the national level. I mean, there's plenty of places in New York, all these other liberal spots, whatnot, where you can see a bit more of that, let's say. But, when you were following the election, there was earlier on this sense of openness. Oh yeah, these people are coming out, they're voting. And on the one hand, I think it's a question of timing. Like if Super Tuesday didn't happen 2 days after the Carolina primary, when Biden won that victory after his trouncing at Nevada, the timing of that could have, if that had gone differently, who knows, right? But, yeah, no, there's definitely this sense of narrowness. And I mean, I've been able to bounce back from that before. It happened in 2016. It happened after a lot of candidates I hoped would win in 2018 didn't win. Stacey Abrams, Andrew Gillum, But with activism, I've always sort of gone back and forth between really getting my hands dirty as far as I could manage in terms of knocking on doors and doing meeting stuff, and then taking a break. And this election cycle still has quite a few months to go, and I don't see myself wanting to dip my toes back in while while the wounds are still kind of raw over what the Democratic establishment did. Maybe on local races, but on the national political scale, I just don't. Call me fragile, but I can't. I just can't get too invested in it emotionally. And so that is a sort of closing off of me from the life of the country. So yeah, there's a sense of withdrawal and disconnection there.
Can I tell you a story about my own life?
Sure.
So I went to college, and I left for college in 95, the fall of 95, with very specific dreams and goals for what I wanted to do with my life. And I went to music school because I loved music. Specifically, I loved records. I loved recorded music, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to um, I wanted to write and produce albums of music that I created. I wanted to be Peter Gabriel or David Bowie or something.
Yeah.
And I there was a twin thing that confronted me is I started pursuing that path at a time, it wasn't a time of national disaster, but it was a time of industry disaster for the music industry. Completely collapsed. It was right after Napster, and it was right after, and there was just this worldwide decision that everybody decided that music should be free and you shouldn't have to pay for it.
Yeah.
And so everybody stopped buying CDs and started pirating downloads.
Yeah.
And so the entire record industry went into a tailspin because and so there just wasn't this whole thing that I wanted to do and when I was like, all right, well, maybe I won't be a frontman, but I could be an arranger, or I could be like something, it didn't exist. There were jobs that weren't there anymore, that had been there 5 years previously, right? So and in the end, it collided with a massive kind of bucket of cold water self-realization that even if I wasn't going to be Peter Gabriel, even if the music industry hadn't collapsed, because I wasn't good enough. Right? I was okay,
Yeah.
but I wasn't that good. And so, but what came out of that, it took a long time for me to kind of work through that. And what I realize now is sort of grieving that on different levels and trying things and being sort of mildly self-destructive and making weird choices about how I was going to spend my time.
Well, I want to know more about that. But
well, just deciding not to go in directions.
Deciding to have kids.
Well, that was much later. But
okay.
I mean, I had kids 20 years after all of this process began. But I'm talking about the path of those 20 years between college and kids. Really is what I'm trying to do here, which is of like kind of running away from anything where I would actually be using skills that I had in a valuable commercial way, because I could still hold on to the dream that I would just burst forth from, and everyone would say, wow, there, look at the genius emerges. But I couldn't do that if I was actually in a place where my stuff was like, my abilities were being judged in a real professional marketplace.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, the point of all this was that I came out of that, and what I'm doing now, the kind of work I'm doing now, and the way I'm using my loves and my skills as a storyteller and as somebody who likes putting audio creations together and things like that, I think is so much more productive and interesting and useful than anything I was trying to do back then. And so even though, all I'm trying to do is tell you that you're a smart and talented and interesting guy. And even if all of the doors will close and lock that you're getting ready to walk through, you are going to find a way to use those talents and build an interesting career for yourself. That's all I was trying to say with that.
Thank you so much. Well, I mean, what you're doing with this, you could be singing, you could be singing "Give Peace a Chance" with all the celebrities, but you're doing so much more better work through this podcast by giving people a voice and giving people this outlet and this release. I mean, this is really helping people, what you're doing. And,
well, geez, thank you.
I hope you're finding a connection. You are stepping up in this moment. I thought I would be able to find research on the 1918 influenza and be like, hey, look at me, I'm contributing to the moment. And, I'm not doing that. You are using your skills that you thought, that you cultivated and that haven't gone to waste, but have been, put in this direction. No, I mean, I'm grateful. I'm thankful that you're saying this. I mean, the so much of the problem with the academy is that it narrows you down and that it valorizes one career path as the only acceptable thing. And not only is that career path difficult to get at the best of times, but in your pursuit of it, you lose touch often with what motivated you in the first place to take it. And this economic disaster that the COVID is foisting on academics, we need to fund our schools. We need to tax the hell out of those who are getting unjustly enriched now, put them into that system. But at the same time, we need to do like what you're saying. We need to, as early as possible, allow people to see where their roads where their lives can take them. And that didn't really happen to me. I wasn't as interested. I was very monofocused. Maybe, along the lines maybe you felt going in, you having that path. Yeah.
I'm very happy that you were willing to share all that, actually. That you're willing to get so personal.
Absolutely.
I think that's not easy to do. And that right there is a talent and a skill that I think a lot of academics are lacking is heart, soul, maybe just ability to get deep and get soulful with a situation and open themselves up. I think that's something you can
I've been going to therapy for a while, so I know how to bring how to fake it or bring it up for any of these things.
Well, thanks for that. Oh, good. Okay, well, so maybe that's an end line.
All right. Yeah, we hit the button. I think that's hitting the button right there.
That was all right. Thank you for talking to me, man. Take care of yourself, will you?
You too. Have a good night.
All right, man. Bye-bye.
Bye.
A couple of weeks after this was recorded, Daniel successfully defended his dissertation via Zoom meeting and is now Dr. Daniel London. My name is David, and this is The Big Shut-In. If you have feedback for me or a story that you would like to share, you can reach me at thebigshutin@racecarradio.com. This show is a production of Racecar Radio, a division of Citizen Racecar.